Beyond Vietnam speech relate to today? So, of course, the Beyond Vietnam speech, when he said the bombs in, exploding, the bombs in Vietnam are exploding over here, partly because of, all the bad effects in this country, right? So all the resources being used on that instead of on people's needs, beside the trauma to the people and the people being killed and the people having moral injury, for that matter, that are over there fighting and coming back, with PTSD. So anyway, so all of that's part of the Beyond Vietnam speech. And the nonviolence principles are basically, one, that nonviolence is a way for courageous people, and it's really about, those nonviolence principles. And then we'll talk about how it relates to today, including the shooting that went on about the police. How does that relate? Nonviolence principles. And then how does this energize your work at the Western New York Peace Center and other work that you're doing? And what are your visions for the beloved community and what keeps you going? Which I'll prompt people for that. You don't have to remember all that.
Facebook is ready when you're ready.
Okay, so are you both ready?
Ready.
Okay, here we go.
Is your timer set to 59:59?
Yes.
Okay, hit the silver switch that turns on the timer. Put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being brought to you here, produced in Think Twice Radio at the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. Thank you, too, to WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station that is coming out of Buff State. So thank you to our friends at Buff State. And while we're remembering to thank people and acknowledge, we want to thank and acknowledge our Haudenosaunee brothers and sisters, acknowledge their stolen land that most of us are on stolen Haudenosaunee land. And also remember, as they do, when they start any kind of an event, to remember the people who are gathered, who made it possible, Mother Earth, and all of the wonderful creatures, the swimming four-leggeds and the flying creatures, all of our wonderful plants, our medicinal plants, our food, and the wonderful trees, and so many different beautiful elements and parts of creation that make this world continue, and that we should learn to continue as originally instructed, so that life will continue in this creation. So thank you to the Haudenosaunee, and I would say Nyahweh, and then you all could say Nyo.
No.
Nyo. Nyo. Thank you. So I'm very excited to have special guests again, as always, and especially these special guests from our board, the Western New York Peace Center board. So we have Kellyanne Kowalski. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Vicki.
And we have Talia Rodriguez. Talia.
Talia.
Hi.
So I didn't even say, Kelly, not only are you co-chair of the board, but you're also directing the Food for All program for the Network of Religious Communities.
Yes, and my co-chair's just arrived.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. So Kareema Morris is coming in a moment. I'll introduce her in a moment. Meanwhile, Talia Rodriguez, who is the secretary, who is the chair of the Gender Justice Task Force. And welcome, Talia.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're so grateful. And plus, working at Buff State, by the way, we're talking about our friends at Buff State, working with the community and civic engagement. Is that, or did I get it backwards? Is it back?
No, you were perfect. I am a proud Bengal. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're very grateful for we love Buff State. And here she comes, Kareema Morris. Hi, Kareema.
Hi.
Yeah, she's just getting on. Yeah, just catch your breath, take your coat off.
Thank you.
Yeah, you'll find it's plenty warm and nice in here. So Kareema Morris, also co-chair of the board at the Western New York Peace Center, and also founder of Bury the Violence.
Yes.
So, and our topic of tonight is, really a hybrid. So we're just finishing up Women's Month, and we're pre-taping this on during March, but this is also going to air on WBNY on April 4th, which is a very significant day in our history because of Reverend Dr. King.
Right.
So we want to really focus on that, remember him, and we thought we'd talk about how, how that relates to where we are today and what we need. It's so important. So before we do, if we could just go around and just share some principles. So I'd say, why don't we go around counterclockwise like the Haudenosaunee do? So I'll ask Talia first. Talia, what would you say for some principles that you think you'd like to hold up in this conversation and also in general with this topic of Dr. King and Beyond War and the beloved community?
I would definitely say nonviolence. Violence comes from my identity as a Christian. And I also think one important value is acknowledging. I know that my grandma marched with Martin Luther King Jr., as well as many Puerto Ricans. And I think showing respect for the legacy and doing that in a way that's not critical, but is going to help us move forward, I think is so nonviolence and then retrospection, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. That reminds me of Sankofa we were just talking about the other day. I know Open Buffalo had that looking back so we know how to go forward. So thank you for that. And of course, nonviolence. Kelly?
With the theme of Dr. King, one would be justice, as he fought for justice for everyone, and respect, as well as courage, the courage that he brought and he gave to so many individuals to fight for justice.
Absolutely. Those are wonderful ones. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. And Kareema?
Well, I didn't get to hear Talia, so hopefully I'm not mimicking or echoing off of
No,
her
it
because I
doesn't
didn't have
matter. Doesn't matter.
so nonviolence. I mean, just with what happened on the Oscars and things like that, we all have to take a step back and take a deep breath and think before we react, in which it's not a tripling effect across the world with something as simple as a slap, a smack. And because it's our children are watching, they're watching us on social media, and it's just a massive promotion of violence right now with something as simple that was aired on TV by one of the American icons. So, nonviolence.
Right. Nonviolence, and always nonviolence. I want to say, I mean, that it's so, so I'll just say, that along with that nonviolence, I just can't help saying truth and love. Dr. King, I always think, and one of the biggest encouragements to me is when he said, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. So I think we're really at a point where, we keep seeing it in so many ways, and they'll thread it through the conversation, just how much we need real nonviolence, that being the change, which of course it was it was Gandhi said, be the change that we want to see in the world. So that being the nonviolence, trying to be the nonviolence, and anyway, so I think maybe what I'd like to start out with is, there's something just, so I know Kareema was a little bit, later because there's a lot going on in Buffalo tonight, that there was a shooting, and so why don't you just tell us what you know about what's happened or what you've heard about what happened tonight?
I believe it is. There's a press conference right now by the DA. I believe there are confirmed 3 officers shot.
Wow.
Over 100 rounds, broad daylight. The rumor was on social media it's a suspected killer. And then I had to reach out to the family because, that's just an emotional cord. And so it really set me back even further emotionally and mentally, because I thought, even though it was, a lot of tragic would just happen publicly, I thought that mother would have closure to that person being brought in, or from what I understand, one person is probably deceased, and the other ones are brought into custody. So the whole city is up in arms. The sheriffs.
So you mean, there was there were a couple of police officers injured, and somebody, and
the shooters.
And the shooter, one was killed.
Possibly. I'm waiting
killed.
for the I can't listen to it, so
Right, no,
I like to speak facts.
Right. That's why I asked you for facts. I did ask you for facts.
I just wanted,
Right.
but I wanted
So
to,
the
being here
partner,
right
sure.
now is more important, because I wanted to make sure I held up my end of the bargain, but also
Thank
talk
you.
to the family to see where they're at emotionally with the possibility of it being that person, and seeing if they were confirmed that it was them or not. So
it's not confirmed yet. Or it is.
on social media, people are saying it's not that person.
Okay, so it's not. Yeah.
No.
So we'll say there's a lot of uncertainty about what happened, but we know
Yeah.
there was some shooting and that people have been shot.
Broad daylight,
And
children exposed in the middle of traffic, people crossing the street, and 20, 30 cop cars flying. Helicopters are still out, sheriffs, state troopers. The city is just up in arms right now.
So
So I think, Vicki, maybe
Go ahead.
it would be appropriate if we had a moment of silence for all the people.
I was just
And
thinking.
Kareema, thank you for your
Yes.
work. I mean, I can't even be able to articulate how important what the organization that you created does for our community. But I think, Vicki, maybe that would be a good way to start the conversation.
Well, I think that certainly, intentional, just our strong intention and love going out to all the people involved, to all the trauma that it's created, and all the pain that people have had and will have over this. Just very, very important. And it's so important to remember Dr. King in this time. So that nonviolence, so it's part of the beloved community. So really, as we talk about our values, I think that value of nonviolence, which is really love, that nonviolence is where that restraint comes from, to find another way. Usually, although, there's other, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that violence is something that people may do to protect other people. It's a sin people take on themselves to protect other people. So that's what he said, and he knew about a plan to assassinate Hitler, and he was then found and incarcerated and beheaded for knowing about it. And the plan, of course, failed. We know he had his bitter end anyway. But that was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So, there's something to be said for that. But I also feel that Dr. King's principles, one of the things he said in his principles is that nonviolence is a way for courageous people. So it takes a lot of courage, and it makes me think of transforming power, which is something that comes out of Alternative to Violence program. They use that phrase and that concept of transforming powers, which, you could say it's the Holy Spirit. You could say it's just love in action, or it's just that wisdom and inspiration to do the right thing, to find a thing. And there's not always a thing, or it's not always what we think it might be, but it includes everything from humor to, a touch at the right moment to I think of one time when I was sure I was going to get mugged. I realized that I was very, this person was trying to act very cool about it, but I knew they were coming for me. And it was 9 o'clock near the public library. And my transforming power was I knew which one was my car, and he didn't know. So that saved me. So that was a transforming power. But a lot of times it's other things that just, reach out to the person in that person who's distraught, or whose fight, flight, freeze is raging, and all that, when we're talking about what's going on, that fight, flight, freeze is so big. And that's why the nonviolence takes real practice and real, both courage and just a huge amount of strength.
And he used the word brother a lot in the speech. When he used the word enemy, and he talks about using nonviolence and compassion as a way to understand the enemy's point of view, to hear his questions and to understand his assessment of ourselves. And I think of Kareema's work and how important it is to realize in these situations, we are, both sides are neighbors. We cannot look at someone who lives next to us as an enemy, and understanding both sides of whatever acts of violence occur, including the one that occurred today, affect parties on both sides, and that work needs to be done holistically. That's why I think it's so important that Kareema continues to reach out to community members. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So much so. That's really one of the things we want to talk about, is how those principles and how that Beyond Vietnam speech relates to, to the Western New York Peace Center as well, and to, each of you have, as I was saying during the introduction, you each have your own different areas that you're working in, which is not unusual for people on the board, are people who are committed to the principles of nonviolence, of the beloved community, of trying to, of believing and making it happen, another world, where people are caring for each other, where nonviolence is a way. So maybe if we just go around and say a little bit, how do we think the Beyond Vietnam speech and or those principles are relating to what we're doing both at the Western New York Peace Center and in other ways in our work, or in your work. So Talia, and then Kelly, and then Kareema.
So I spent the majority of my time developing capacity within my own community so that we could feed ourselves. I think self-determination and efficacy, especially as it relates to a basic need, is something that I feel strongly about. So we spent some time building pantries and also building systems of support where people who have the lived experience of poverty, specifically food insecurity, can lead. And I feel as if Dr. King talks a lot about the suffering. There's a sentence that really struck me, and I actually wrote it down, so I wanted to share it. But I feel as almost it relates to what's going on now, and it says, "I speak for the poor of America who are paying double price for smashed hopes at home." My people and many people in America are under a lot of stress as it relates to food security. So I think dedicating myself to helping my community learn the systems that be and help navigate them really relates to the suffering that Dr. Martin Luther King referred to.
Thanks, Talia. Kelly?
Well, from the Peace Center perspective, I think that we really work on so much that he talks about, especially with the economic justice. Economic justice kind of covers everything. Of course, Vietnam was, really at that point there. So it's the anti-militant and how much that actually cost America.
Right.
And how much, the social justice. I mean, it's he kind of has everything wrapped up in there, which is so amazing. But it's really the injustice. And I think the whole thing is the oppressor, keeps on oppressing. and he was kind of trying to bring light to that with the cost of the war, with the racial injustice, with poverty, which of course is economic justice. I mean, so much actually really ties with economic justice.
Absolutely.
And I think at the Peace Center, we really try to really bring all that together, as
Right.
well as, in my own work, which is at Food for All, we're also really trying to work on the injustice of hunger, which is also tied back to economic justice, where food is really important, but it is, extremely important, but it's really working on the root causes, which is the oppressor. Once again, it just kind of comes back full circle.
Right.
So I think, my work with the, Food for All and the Peace Center just kind of really wrap in pretty tightly.
Right. Right. So very true. Very true. Makes me think of the Poor People's Campaign too.
Me too, yeah.
Which also brings it all together. And the Western New York Peace Center certainly, we try to unite the struggles, and we keep bringing out that same way that, as Dr. King said in the Beyond Vietnam, that the bombs over there are exploding over here, is the same way that now we couldn't get, we couldn't get about 170, $170 billion. It sounds so incredible that we couldn't get for infrastructure and people's needs, but they can spend 4 times that without blinking an eye on military and on a renewed nuclear, a new generation of nuclear weapons that they're working on.
And we continue to do that in
Right.
2022.
Right. It's just so crazy. So what is wrong with this picture? People don't have food. They don't have daycare. We don't have what we need. And in other countries, they don't have what they need. But everything goes into these munitions.
But if you think the onset of what happened prior to what we don't have, we come out of a pandemic into a world war in which it set the tone for that. And that's where I believe some of these things are intentional. It's timing. And the timing has opened up the doors to cause it to be a worldwide struggle at one time in which we're going to rescue somebody and we can't rescue ourselves.
Right. Trying to rescue somebody, we're going right off the brink because, somebody said, there is no violent solution. Right? So it's not a solution. If it's violent, it's not going to be a solution. So this is what I'm thinking of. And I don't think it's an easy slam dunk. So, but anyway, so do you want to say a little more about how to you it really, those principles or the Beyond Vietnam speech are really speaking to what's going on here and now? So
I was cheating because
No,
my
not
brain is
cheating.
15 places.
Yeah.
And I think this is the right thing. When I opened it up, the words that jumped out to me in all of my fast reading was, the truth of these words is beyond doubt. But the mission to which they call us is the most difficult one. And that's what we have. We have to base everything off of truths, not of our side, not of our views, but the truths. And then it's difficult because it's all melting into a resolution on our end. They look at America for a resolution. They look at the Peace Center for a resolution. And who's standing on the truths of what's really happening? You said that violence is not the answer and that it's not going to resolve, but yet it's what they turn to.
And this, what I feel is that it's the vicious circle. So back to what you said about the oppressor, and or just the violence that's done, that, there's a cycle of violence. That's what we know. We know it about child abuse. We know it about wars. Back to, people can win a war. All wars are lost. Women in Black has a sign. All wars are lost. Because both, everyone will lose. And the people who think they're winning, in the end, they're losing. And they've planted the seeds for the next violent encounter. So in the seeds of World War II were in World War I when the Germans were defeated and then they were just made to pay exorbitant amounts of reparations, that set the stage for World War II and for
That and them starting some good old fight clubs.
right. There you go. Yes, that's
So-
go ahead. Yep.
I was just going to say, I feel like it's really important to teach our children nonviolence, especially our female leaders among the children. And one of the things that makes me committed to nonviolence is the violence I've seen perpetrated against children in my own community. And just a reminder to people that it's not okay to be cruel to children because it's hard to be an adult right now. Right. And that looking at nonviolence starting at the home, I think, is always the way to solve the issue and understand it as a unit. And I really find a lot of nonviolent principles in the Bible, despite this in there.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's really important that no matter what's going on, and Kareema really brings like that perspective of peace, right? That like you're in the middle of it and you're looking at a child saying nonviolence is the right answer, and just being brave enough to say that, I think, is leadership.
It's the recycling of trauma. The parent is traumatized. They have past traumas from the family, and everybody want to reach back to ancestors, and you don't know the trauma that those people ensued upon your bloodline.
Right.
And then you have an angry child battling things. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. And at the end of the day, you don't know what that child is going through because we've already interjected our traumas on them in the way we raise them.
Right.
Some people don't take time to reflect and think that they can change. They automatically feel oppressed. They automatically feel a thing, and then the child is to carry the weight of the world just by being born.
Right.
So we have to alleviate our children the stress, post-traumatic stress that we carry,
Right.
and trauma
Right.
that we're putting on them.
And that's where we need to take
And
care.
turn it into joy. Sorry.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Just turn that into joy, like that pain.
And it's a deep work that we have to do, because there's not the thing is, when we get to the point where it seems like violence is the only solution, it's because, first of all, I don't believe that it is, but there's an argument sometimes when you've waited long enough, you've gone down the wrong path long enough, then from where you're at to reach back, there's so many other things that happen that sort of get you. Once you're to a certain place, some of your other options are gone. They've passed by. So that's where it's that deep work of, as you say, with our children and with ourselves, having a real transformation. Actually, I heard it, our friends at Voice Buffalo just said, there's no transformation without restoration. So we need transformation because we're headed to go over the cliff. We have potential nuclear war. People are getting all gung-ho. Oh, we need to defend, anything and everything. And that violence keeps, feeding that cycle. So meanwhile, we're trying to build up the other end of it, is to build the beloved community, to build trust in the community, to build capacity for social justice and will and belief that it can even be done, and that it needs to be done for everyone's good, because this imbalance is not good for any of us. And we have so much imbalance that is out of balance in our society.
Well, I think that a major thing is we really have to believe that there are enough assets for all of us.
Right.
Because violence comes out of fear.
Right.
So when the oppressor fears that they are no longer going to be ruling, or they're no longer going to have 3/4 of the pie, that is where fear comes in. So, it's fear, it's not even for the oppressor. I mean, because when we're fearful of not having enough food to eat, that also brings in violence. So
Right.
it's really realizing that there are enough resources that we can all live comfortably, and believing that, and that we can share the resources and share the wealth and share these things, and not really, take all and hoard. Hoarding's just never good.
Right. No. Right. And the people, I'm going to say that, there's a certain point, certainly like our billionaires, and we have more billionaires now than ever before, that those billionaires, they can't even spend, even they can go to the moon, to the Mars, wherever they want. They still not spending all their money, because their money is still just building more money. So it doesn't benefit them. What does it benefit them? Past the first couple million, after a while, it's not helping them. So it's only hurting all of us, and it's really hurting them. They may not see it. Someday they'll see it. That'll probably be on the other side. That's my theory, but,
I think for values, Vicki, I was telling my mom, I don't understand why people now feel like greed is leadership. Like, that is confusing to me. I am from Buffalo, where your character is supposed to be expressed by the way that you conduct yourself and the way that you treat others, especially the vulnerable. And my community and other communities admire people simply by their virtue that they're greedy and that they've acquired wealth. And I'm like, why does that make that person a leader? Do you know what I mean?
Well, true wealth is your spirit.
right.
And your wisdom. And without it, no matter what dollar amount you have, you are not going to win. And that's just the truth of it, because money can destroy you.
Right.
It's the answer to all things, but it's the root of evil.
Right.
So if you don't use it with wisdom, you're just reckless, and it's going to inadvertently implode.
Right.
I just want to barter. I just want to drink things.
What?
I said, I just want to barter. Like, I just want to drink.
Right,
It's so much easier.
right.
Resources.
But another way is possible. That's why I love that phrase, because it is possible. And sometimes just doing things differently by itself is a help. So, and certainly using nonviolence and using those principles. So nobody is an enemy, not hating on people, just having that compassion. Truth and love. So truth, that's where the truth part comes in, is to see where are the imbalances. Why is that happening? We used to have a 90% tax rate on the very richest people. And they were still rich, and they still managed, to be rich. And then, after a certain point with Reagan, and then from then on, including, Democrats and Clinton, there was all those years where it just kept going more and more to the wealthy class, to the corporations, and to the 1%, getting all kinds of advantages in the way things are. The other thing is the profound violence in our society. So the things that the creation of this country on, stealing, or really attempted genocide, and stealing of all the land, and then the enslavement of people from Africa, bringing them over here, and all of that, since it has never really been dealt with, and it's certainly not restored, those roots are still in us. So this Sankofa, back to which one of you, or I think a couple of you have talked back to, you said the legacy, and the remembering those teachings that we were all talking about. Those are the things that we need to use. Those are the tools that we need to use to reduce the violence, because we see the violence in our societies only growing. And if our only way of dealing with it is with more violence, and the same with Ukraine, we need to be, diplomacy, communication, negotiation, cooperation, seeing the other person's point of view, what about owning our own mistakes and our own faults?
But what's so crazy is so many old mindsets that need to be done away with. There's no innovation, there's no refreshing, there's no restoration. Where is the breath of fresh air in all of this? We are recycling things that weren't resolved. Mm-hmm. All the way back to slavery, if you think about it.
Right.
People are still looking back. No one's looking forward. And the innovative part is almost like it's not being breathed into these situations, because they want to go back here and fix something instead of looking forward to see how we can do it.
Well, I think part of the thing about looking back is more about acknowledging, just so that...
No, I mean
because
the resolution of how
Right,
we
how
can
do we-
change. So
yeah.
like you teach joy to kids instead of your traumas. When do we embrace our truths to teach those joys? Because you're so bombarded, you come home from work, you're angry. First thing you do is go off on the kids, right? So you're not teaching them joy. We're reaching back. My whole day was terrible, so I'm bringing it home with me. Nobody's taking a deep breath to say, okay, we had this issue with Russia for how long? How can we come to the table together?
Right. No, we need to be, well, that's part of that is having the truth. That's why I said about the truth of acknowledging what mistakes we've made. So so any of those things, when we don't acknowledge, that's where we're not able to start afresh.
Right,
You
because
know?
I'm Puerto Rican and I'm just sitting here like, well, people are upset that someone has invaded someone and they took my entire island. And like, literally 25 years after the United States took over, 80% of us were landless, right? And we're still living in poverty. Like my grandma comes from the projects because she was landless. So I think that goes back to Kelly's idea of like this economic justice, but also understanding who we are as a country. When I learned
Right.
that, it really put something in context for me.
So that's where that is a path forward, is by just acknowledge. Actually, back to the indigenous Gnoño, they start off with acknowledgement, greetings and acknowledgement, and then, and then appreciation, right, of what there is. And then, and there's also the sustainability, so not taking more than you need. So back to what you said about hoarding or that's the other thing, is so that we have enough to make sure everybody has what they need, but we've not been able to do that. And that's where, as you say, different ways, finding different ways of doing things, and really checking out our priorities. I mean, that's what we really need to be doing, and putting the emphasis on people on the planet and not on Fear Inc. So I feel like the war, the other thing is about foreign policy and all of this historic stuff really sets the stage for everything else. So that when, things, our own violence and, let's say, the founding, the violent found, the misdeeds in our history that set the stage for where we are today, if we can acknowledge them and then change things as we move forward, that's where we have a path to a sustainable society that can continue to exist. If we keep, supporting violence or feeling that violence is our solution or is our way out, we just keep getting more of the same. More violence coming back at us. So it was the violating our agreement, with Russia to stop promoting NATO and trying to get more members in NATO. If we had left things like that and not trying to have, unquestioned world dominance, and it was never low enough. It was never clear enough. We just have to have more and more and more, right?
Well, I think also it's understanding the complexity of everything. Nothing is all right and nothing is all wrong.
Sure.
So it's not black
Sure.
and white. It's complexity. It's the complexity of the parent coming home that's angry, that, really, and it's hard to, it takes a lot of courage, which is one of the values that I had mentioned,
Right,
to
that's
really
a great
work
one.
on your trauma, because
Yeah.
it is difficult. And it's one of the hardest things you may do. But then if you are able to do that, you may be able to break the pattern. But when we have trauma on this side and trauma on that side, it just makes everything so complex. It's not, once again, this person is necessarily not all right or not all wrong, nor
Right.
is this person.
Right.
But people want everything to be black and white and clear, and we want to put people in boxes where
Right.
we really have to really look at the person and, like namaste. Like I see the I don't know what is it, the spirit,
The spirit
in
yeah,
you that
or
is
the
in,
God in you, really.
right? And it's the same thing. Is I see the trauma that is in you that is also in me, because we always carry it. But we want to also say like, oh well, my trauma is more severe than your trauma, right?
No,
I mean,
I
we do
don't.
this all the time.
No balance.
Right, and it's
trying to
not.
cap-
It's just, and because trauma, no matter what my trauma is, if it's motivating me to do hate, it doesn't mean that mine's worse than yours. It's just I'm not dealing with it.
Right.
So it's just really, if we can see how complex things are, to really kind of bring it down to that we can really have conversation and be honest, like you said, with each other, and accept and say, hey, yeah, I made a mistake here, and and moving forward.
And find our own ways to create some peace inside ourselves so that we do and can feel that joy, and that we can share that, and then just sort of get things on another. I just think this, why we started off with values all the time is for that very reason, is just to help us build up the things that we need to build up. I know in Peace Jam we really try to do that and help the children and youth. One of the things we do centering, just deep, slow breathing, or different things to just calm ourselves. And then we, working on relationship. We sometimes say peace on all the levels. So inside ourselves,
I like
it won't be perfect peace. It's always, it's they say sometimes say the razor's edge. We'll have it, and then sometimes we don't have it, and we need to find our ways to reestablish it or help each other. Right?
balance.
That's when and we find our
So,
balance
Vicki,
together. Yes.
I'm going to transition off because I have to go get my little guy.
Sure.
But I want to just respond to what Kelly said. I almost emotionally reacted when she referred to people putting people in boxes. There's Native American children who are sitting in detention centers right now. This country has a fetish with incarceration.
Right.
And people that mass incarceration or sending someone to quote jail is going to end the cycle of violence, and it just perpetrates it. So I
Exactly.
But it's economic justice, and it keeps someone a job. Right?
It's
So it all
economic
comes down to
injustice.
economic
Yeah,
justice.
right. No.
So put them on a farm.
Speaking as
produce
a
more
warden's
food.
daughter,
Right.
my father was a warden, Kelly, and I think you know that, right? Like my dad
Right.
in
Yes.
prison, and
Right.
like my childhood was spent understanding that world. While it does provide people jobs, and I think that is something that it's important to think about in context to why it does, right? Like, how have we built this industrial complex around mass incarceration as a country historically? And I've taken some time to understand that. But I think for me, one of the points that I wanted to make in closing is that there are complex levels to healing, and that mass incarceration and incarcerating Black and Brown people as a point of population control, or because we think that that's going to make the street safer, has not worked.
At all. It hasn't worked at all. And I think that's one
And
of
I
the
thank you
reasons.
for being here.
That's one of that's one we were working on together
with.
with you. We'll keep working on that together with you, as we have been. So thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for coming. So I'm glad that Talia was able to join us. And she's so right about the carceral system is a terrible. People do need jobs, of course, but there are so many other jobs, and what we need jobs are actually taking care of other people. One of the things that we
With
just
dignity. Could you
with
imagine
dignity.
paying
Yeah.
healthcare workers and people in nursing
Right.
homes a decent wage
and
to take care of
childcare.
people with dignity?
Yes,
Imagine that.
and child care, right? With child care, we were talking about or early childhood education.
Yeah.
Right. We're or taking care and truly. Helping people turn their lives around, helping people deal with their trauma, shame, and or stress, and then, where people are going astray, or where we do lose our way, which we all do at different times
We
and
all
ways.
do, because we're human.
Yeah, so helping people, helping each other, there are ways of doing it that will build up the beloved community and not tear it down. So I want to say, just putting more metal detectors at schools is not going to get us to the beloved community. It's more of Fear Inc. It's
But-
more.
The,
Go ahead.
that you almost struck a nerve. The bad thing is sometimes, again, it's the adult's trauma that's being interjected on the children, and it's reactive. So if I come in the morning and I've been dealing with, we just dealt with today as a city,
Right.
the whole city sitting here
Yes.
watching,
Right.
chaos, no answers, no
No,
nothing
so
until it's
terrible.
dark. Kids are in bed. The last thing they seen was we couldn't cross the street for
Right.
20 minutes to get to the store, and I was hungry. I had to use a bathroom because it was all these cop cars and it was people getting shot. And then you got to go to work in the morning, and your teachers coming in from different neighborhoods and communities, or they were nestled away in peace, and they're like, instead of saying good morning, they're like, don't do this, don't do that, stop talking. They just walked in.
Right.
Did you think that they could have had a bad night? Do you know that they dealt with trauma, terror,
Right.
uncertainty, fear before they went to sleep?
Right.
And they're being greeted by your traumas or your demands to make them fear you.
Right. No, we just have a lot of work to do. We just have a real lot of work to do.
And so giving them medication and putting them in the situations in which...
So one,
This is
if we can
crazy.
switch gears a little bit, because, back to, and I think we've been talking about it indirectly, so let's talk about it directly. Some of our visions for the beloved community. How are we going to, reduce the violence, change things up, and how people also can get more involved and help with that too. So maybe if we just go around with that. So what are some of the solutions that we can use to really
I think,
us?
a big solution is really looking at yourself. Looking at yourself, looking at what you're putting out, how you're, talking to people, how you're loving each other, how you're dealing with your neighbors. Even if people honestly started with their own family, right?
Sure.
Really just their own family. I mean, I don't know about you, but there's definitely porcupines in my family that are hard to love, but
Sure.
you still kind of reach out and,
Right.
and it's challenging. I have a few in mind. And if we just really start with our own friends and family and just be there and listen to them when they need to, talk about their trauma and be supportive and be supportive for ourselves. And give ourselves, the teachers or the staff that's greeting the kids, is just give ourselves that time out to say, okay, how are we going to move forward in this day? How are we going to make little people feel, safe? How are we going to make each other feel safe? So I think it starts with ourselves, and really, even if we just do our own friends and family, imagine we would have everyone covered. It would be kind of cool. So compassion.
Well, certainly compassion is absolutely so needed, so critically important.
And even if we don't agree with somebody, I may
Sure.
not agree with everything you say, but it doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you bad. And you're still always going to be my friend. And I can still respect you with not necessarily agreeing with you.
Right.
That's such a novel idea these days.
Right. No, that's very important. So we just accept each other with all our differences and different ideas and everything else. And then I like the Tao of conversation where, it's just different aspects of the truth that, and not to say that sometimes people aren't just plain wrong. It does happen, but we can still appreciate them or not judge them. I love this saying. It was something like, who am I to hate what God has made? So for people who act differently or do differently, to still have the compassion, to still, it's not the person, it's the behaviors that are the
And
problem.
not to say that's not hard.
Right.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Loving someone who is, different or maybe not on the same page. It's definitely not an easy task, but if we can start with ourselves, we could be a pretty amazing community.
Right.
We don't give grace.
Yeah.
And we expect
Right.
people to extend grace where we don't give it. And that's part of the cycle.
Right.
But
Right. I think that's very much of the same idea of grace is so, that understanding, that compassion, that, just the not judging, or not judging harshly, just, trying to see where a person is coming from, listening, deep listening, and that humanity,
Well, like again, I'm gonna drag it. When everybody has something to say about Will, nobody thinks that we're in a pandemic. Even though he didn't smack the other guy for what him and his wife dealt with, that's what they dealt with in their marriage, and we're holding him accountable for his marriage and that affair, instead of understanding as a man and as a father and as a husband, he was under extreme stress.
Sure.
He had an issue with, he just got fed up and he looked at his wife because I seen her expression. And, he felt her pain and he went there.
Right.
And then if everybody had the grace of Chris Rock to turn the other cheek that way,
Right.
then we would have a more understanding to know that, okay, something was going on.
Right.
Right. And then we forget we have something going on too. And we've smacked somebody, but not on TV.
Right.
But hey, let's all go to social media and make it a big thing. And, and so you have the extension of violence based on what happened. You have everybody cheering on violence. And you have other
And judging.
And you have other people judging.
Right. Cheering on violence or judging. Those are our choices. So we can do differently. And I think, that's really what, I think what I love about Dr. King and the principles, back to we're all human, we're all flawed. He was too, and he wasn't the only person in the movement. He couldn't have done it without, I'm going to say, the unsung women and the unsung other people who all, were part of that movement and making it happen. But that sort of looking at both the very broadest of pictures and the very smallest, the very biggest picture about, how the bombs in Vietnam are exploding over here, and how, all of our social ills just feed on each other. And the more we set up might is right is our model, the more that's what happens in the street. That's what our kids see.
I'm going to be extremely vulnerable here and say something so with MLK for a long time, I saw his flaws, right? And I had to look at myself and say that we're all flawed, because we put leaders and heroes on pedestals, right?
Right.
So, I had to look at those flaws, or I had to accept those flaws. I had to say, oh my God, this man's human. And once I could do that, I actually could see what an amazing person he was.
Right.
Because I think even in history, I think even in the schools, we don't even get into the real stuff, the depth of really MLK and who he was, or, and what he's actually brought. I mean, when you look at MLK, I compare him to Jesus, Gandhi, and MLK. Those are three people that have really worked for compassion and really changing things. So, I mean, it's just, and like I said, for the longest time, I'm like, okay, there's these flaws. And we're all full of flaws. Look at yourself. I had to look into myself, to accept the flaws. And I think if more people did that,
Absolutely. Yep, we all do need to do that. We are coming a little bit towards the end of the time. I want to mention Peace Jam a little bit, that we're doing Peace Jam on Thursdays at the Meriwether Library, 3 to 5 every Thursday. Deidre Emel, our executive director, is really leading that program. We have, a number of other people helping. I do come help out at times. It's a wonderful thing. It's just such a great program. Inspiration, education, and action for our children. Planting seeds, absolutely. Helping them, find peace on all the levels and find ways of making peace and justice. It's very, very much on social justice. So it's one of the ways that we're working on it. So if you think of some other ways that I think, we have a women's march coming up in May, May 15th. And actually, we will just have had our Western New York Peace Center annual meeting is coming up on Sunday, or will have just been on Sunday. That is April 3rd.
Third.
Yeah, 3rd at
And Kareema is our
2.
speaker.
Yes, and Kareema is our speaker. So if you haven't seen it, then, we'll be posting it on the website.
And she
Otherwise,
was in Just
if you're
USA
getting
Today the other day.
I know. I should have mentioned
She
that
is
right off
our
the bat.
hometown person.
Yeah. Oh, well, because you're doing such important work. You really are. And
I
just
admire
taking so
all the
many-
work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, we're just so lucky that you've been working with us so long and that you're hopefully continuing in between everything. So there's so much to do, but you're already doing so much. So why don't you each give like your last word? What do you want people to remember out of this?
Compassion. Be compassionate with your neighbors and yourself. Mm-hmm. Your neighbors, family, and yourself. Compassion.
Absolutely.
Extend the same grace that you would expect somebody to give to you.
Right. We have to do that. So let us do that. Let us do it in our daily lives, in our trying to understand the struggles that are going on, in our trying to help work those struggles out in a way that life can continue in this creation, as our indigenous friends would say, and we have a lot of work to do, but we are doing it together. I mean, I can't say enough, and you're both going off the board, which I am very sorry about, but it's a term limit thing. So, you can go off for a year and then you can come back on.
That 1 year might be so pivotal.
Yes, it might be. It might be. And then you'll be all refreshed. But anyway, just planting seeds.
She's going to say, don't call it a comeback.
Yeah. But anyway, we are so grateful for all the work that both of you do. And Kareema, you really take on so much in the community, and you have for the Western New York Peace Center as well, and for Bury the Violence, and for your family and the community. Very grateful. And Kelly, you also you do a tremendous amount. You continue to, and I can't be, and Talia, it's so wonderful to have Talia on. So we're talking peace, and you've been so kind as to come on. It's so much going on, but we're coming through it. We'll keep right on. And so thanks again. So this is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We made
Thank
it.
you.
So great. Thanks a jillion.
I get to meet you in person.
We're in person. Oh, and I
of the
have treats for us. That's what I brought. Wait, so there's 4 pieces of candies. Wait a minute, let me
not
find them.
candy.
No, you can't do it. No.
Did you see my spread?
No.
Party.
What?
I had a charcuterie party.
Oh, no, I didn't see
I had a
that.
charcuterie party. I had
Oh, I didn't
cake
see it.
pops,
It was just on?
cupcakes.
You just posted it?
Oh my goodness, ridiculousness, okay? And I'm trying to work this down. I've been drinking water all day.
I don't know
Well,
how
here.
you do it. Well, I thank you.
Here, Richard.
Do you
So
sleep?
you don't want a piece of candy?
It's gonna be crazy when I get
I don't eat candy.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
So how bad was it leaving the city? I mean, I know
I just need to make sure.
So you don't
this is
want a
off.
piece of candy?
No,
No,
ma'am.
you don't.
No, ma'am. You'll say, okay, I understand. Just 2 seconds.
Thank you so
Now, yeah, tell us what you
So
know
these were
now.
my cupcakes.
Oh, Miss Eck-
My
Oh.
pull-apart cupcakes.
Oh.
It's the Me for Me. That was the name of my celebration.
Is it,
'Cause
was it a birthday or was
No,
it?
it was just my celebration for myself and my work. If I wait for other people to clap, I'll
I
never
just-
hear it. So
Yeah, no.
I clap. Well, I mean, I love you guys,
Clap,
but
clap,
you know,
clap.
people. So I clap for myself, and
Well,
these were my
let me
cake
know, 'cause I
sickles.
wanna clap
This is why I
for
don't
you,
need
too.
candy. Cake sickles.
Where did you do
chocolate
this?
covered pineapples at the High Rift House
that?
on 501 Delaware. And these were my Oreos and my gourmet popcorn.
What is the
So it's a space that women own at 501 Delaware. It's $25